modifications and changes to it that it's just easier to reintroduce it. And so I'm going back to the original
May or may
place.
not end up here. Yeah.
Probably will end up with me, but I wanted to follow their wishes as we went.
Very good. Committee, any questions or objections to introduction? Seeing none, that bill's introduced. Thank you, Senator. I've got several. Are there any other bill introductions, by the way, before? You have some, Chase?
I do have one.
Senator Blasey, if you, or do you need a second?
Well, I can get the RS number to the reviser, but it's a license plate for the best zoo in the Midwest, the Sedgwick County Zoo. They would like a license plate, which is in my district. Proud to represent them. And that's what that is, and I'll get the RS number if that works.
Okay. Any questions or objections to introduction to that bill? Seeing none, that is introduced. Any other bill introductions? I have some, Jason, here. I've got Senate Bill 2308, and that has to do with advanced ballot applications. Committee, any questions on that or objection to introduction? Seeing none, that's in, oh, do you have a question? Yes. Senator Faustigato.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the advanced ballot applications to, can you elaborate?
Yes. There was an election officer in Johnson County that sent out a number of advanced ballot applications without any requests. And that's, you know, we wanted to clarify that somebody has to send in a request for an advanced ballot and then they can send it out. But they printed like $75,000 worth of ballots and sent it out unrequested. So it was an unnecessary expenditure and without the request. So that's what that's about. Any other questions or objections? Seeing none, that's introduced. I've got one. I don't know if it'll end up in this committee or not. Probably end up in local government. It's 24 RS 2337. That has to do with upzoning and downzoning. Any questions or objections to the introduction there? Seeing none, that's introduced. Then RS 2542. And that is also a little, I'd have to look at that one real fast. Make sure 2542. Got a billion bills here. I don't know if you have that one, Jason, or not. Before I introduce that, I'll just stop with those two right there. No, I do have one other. It has to do with voter ID. That's 24 RS 2326. And that has just some voter ID for the mail-in voters, just covering identification or verification of voter ID for those folks who do vote by mail. Any questions on that or objections? Seeing none, that is introduced. Okay. Thank you, committee. Without further ado, then, we have the hearing we're going to open on Senate Bill 36. And I'm going to ask Jason to come up to the microphone and give us a bill brief on it. Jason?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. First bill for the 2024 legislative session in this committee is Senate Bill 36. This was introduced last session and referred to this committee. The bill makes a couple of amendments to the Kansas Act Against Discrimination. As you recall, that act prohibits discrimination on the basis of a number of different categories. based on characteristics or traits of individuals. This one seeks to clarify the term ancestry, which is a protected class under the Act. The current law, those other classes are race, religion, color, sex, disability, national origin, and then, of course, ancestry. The clarifying definition is that the term ancestry is inclusive of traits historically associated with a person's ancestry and includes hair texture and protective hairstyles. The bill also provides a clarifying definition of protective hairstyles as including braids, locks, and twists. Section 2 of the bill makes another amendment within the Act. There are general provisions of the Act, and then there are provisions that are more specific to real estate transactions. The Second Amendment you see in the bill, which is on page 4 of the bill, makes an amendment to incorporate that definition of ancestry into the real estate transactional statutes that are part of the Act. So that's the Second Amendment. The bill would go into effect on July 1st of this year if it is enacted, and I'll be happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions? I have a couple because I want to make sure we clarify what exactly we're defining. And it, with regard to the protective hairstyles, are there any that would be excluded? Because it says included but not limited to hairstyles such as braids, locks, and twists. But I'm just thinking outside the box. Are we talking about hairstyles that are related to ancestry? I just want to clarify so we know exactly what we're talking about.
So yes, the term protective hairstyle is a part of the term ancestry, and so it's a trait that's historically associated with that individual's ancestry. So that's the context for the protective hairstyle. The definition of it is probably more exemplary than anything. It's not limiting it just to those terms, braids, locks, and twists. So other protective hairstyles could be included in that as long as they're part of that individual's ancestry.
Okay.
So that's the connection.
It could be any type of ancestry, any type of hairstyle. Is that?
That's correct. It's not limited in terms of any one particular ancestry, as long as the person has a demonstrated ancestry and there are certain hairstyles that are associated with that ancestry, they would fall within this.
Question, Senator Longvine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason, I think we heard something similar a number of years ago, and I'm trying to remember the discussion, but is there anything that is in conflict or would supersede either OSHA or KDHE regulations with this as far as food service workers or anything like that? Are there any conflicts, or is this attempting to oversee any OSHA or KDHE regulation?
No, I believe any health and safety regulations would still supersede anything under this. So if there is a legitimate need for a safety health regulation related to hairstyles, that would still apply.
Thank you.
Senator Reichman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess the idea that's behind this is make sure that they're not discriminated against and lose their job or something like that. Or is that the reason for this bill? Or I'm not quite getting my understanding that why we're having it.
That's correct. The Act protects individuals from being discriminated against in employment or receiving services that are generally available to the public on the basis of one of those protected classes. And so this clarifies that you cannot discriminate against somebody on the basis of their ancestry, and that includes the hairstyles that are historically associated with that ancestry.
So if I hear you correctly, an employer who, say, has a manufacturing plant, and even somebody who has maybe long hair that could get caught in machinery, they could still say, hey, for safety reasons, we need your hair cut at a certain length or something like that, and not be at jeopardy of discrimination or something like that.
That's correct. largely it's fact specific, and usually there's a term like reasonable accommodations that are made, and so an employer could require an employee to at least address the length of their hair in some fashion to abide by safety regulations. That doesn't necessarily mean having the length cut off if they can somehow fix the hair up in a way that it's protected underneath their head, protective covering, something to that effect. This just protects the employee from being directly terminated because of the hairstyle that they choose to wear based on their ancestry.
And one other question I have, did you have one, Senator Blasey? One other question, and I hate to take it to the absurd, but these days you have to. What about somebody who has green hair? That's not ancestry, but I mean, some people do all sorts of wild stuff with their hair these days. We don't want to, you know, exclude or include them. I mean, that's a personal choice, has nothing to do with ancestry, but.
That's correct. The act is directed at protecting people based on certain classifications that are generally thought of as immutable classifications, such as your ancestry, your national origin. And while green hair traditionally wouldn't be thought of as an ancestral hairstyle, I'm not going to say there isn't a fact scenario out there where a person's ancestry is demonstrated to involve different colorations of their hair, including the color green, and therefore they have dyed their hair green as part of their ancestral cultural heritage. I'm not going to say that case isn't out there. And so in that specific fact scenario, that could arguably be protected under this amendment as well.
I say that because I've got a girl in our church that sings in the choirs, has bright green hair, and it's just kind of out there. Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanting to clarify, so ancestry is currently a unlawful discrimination practice, right? I mean, so you can't discriminate against race, religion, color, sex, disability, national origin, or ancestry. Is that correct?
That's correct. We're not adding it as a protected class. We're simply clarifying it as to what is included in the term ancestry.
Was the origin of that probably like no Irish need to apply? I mean, ancestral, is that the root? What was the reason for ancestry being included? I'm just never knew that was in there. Never hear that word used when you talk about discrimination.
No, it's probably included. I don't know the precise reasoning for why that term is included as one of those protected classes. My guess is it's probably gets at certain characteristics or traits of individuals that aren't necessarily covered by maybe their race or their national origin. For instance, if they have a broader ancestry from a broader region that isn't covered by a particular country, national origin, or a particular race due to the demographics, ancestry would still cover that individual and that class of individuals.
And then following up on Senator Thompson's question about green hair, couldn't you argue that Section P or whatever, protective hairstyle includes, but not limited to, hairstyles as braids, locks, and twists? I mean, couldn't you say hairstyle, protective hairstyle is green hair?
Well, remember, it's still in the context of being tied to your ancestry and being historically associated with your ancestry. So you couldn't just claim green hair and claim protection under the act. You would have to claim that your green hairstyle is a part of your ancestry, and you can't discriminate against yourself based on ancestry.
So if this act took place, a business or a school, you know, there's a lot of requirements on traditional hair color, you know, the natural ones. Someone couldn't use this against that, say.
Only if they can show that their hair color is part of their ancestry.
2024, you know, a lot of things happen.
Like I said, sometimes you have to ask these questions that you wouldn't think of. Any other questions, committee? Thank you very much, Jason. I appreciate it. Okay, we're going to, I've got a couple folks who are, would like to speak, and I think for the sake of time, we'll put them at the head of the table here, head of our speaking list. First, I have Representative Stephanie Clayton from the 19th District. Representative?
Sorry, mic is different here. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ranking Member Faust-Godot and members of the committee. Really appreciate having the opportunity to be here. I am the House member who is the chief carrier of this bill on the House side. And so we had an excellent hearing in House Fed and State with some very robust discussion. I see some of the similar conferees here. And so a lot of the questions that you brought up, especially the ones regarding OSHA, regarding hair colors that you don't, traditionally see, such as green, those are very standard questions that come up. Just want to let you know why I wanted to get this bill through and why it's important to me. You'll hear a lot of different perspectives, but to me, there are two main reasons. Number one is that I see this primarily as a workforce issue. Anytime we can reduce discrimination in the workplace while still maintaining safety, I think that that's tremendously important. I think that we are starting to see changing times when it comes to fashion and self-expression. And so you're going to see a lot of things like that being mentioned throughout history. And I think that putting this in place does make it easier from a workforce development standpoint, because it just takes a lot of the oxygen out of the room when it comes to that type of drama and those types of discussions. Now, if it is no longer up for discussion, someone's hairstyle, especially regarding their hair texture, then that allows people to focus on the matter at hand, which is getting the work done. One of the reasons why this is important to me is that I just sort of turned this around on its head and looked at it from a logical fallacy. I have incredibly straight hair. I don't care what I do to it. It will never curl. And I've spent a lot of money as a young lady, particularly in days when having curly hair was considered the style, doing things that were not necessarily healthy for my hair, not healthy for me either. You'll hear more about that from some of the other people providing testimony. And to me, it's, I don't have to worry about that though, because my hair seems to be like predominantly acceptable for reasons I can't understand. But if you turn it around on its head and think about it this way, all right, so for those of us that tend to have straight hair like this, why is it okay for me to go into a workplace and encounter no discrimination, no expectations or societal expectations that I spend or have my parents spend thousands and thousands of dollars on product to make my hair curly that might cause damage to my health, that's money that should be spent on literally anything else. So I look at removing that bizarre and outdated cultural expectation on any citizens, because people should be spending their money on bettering their lives, not altering the way that God made them in order to fit into strange expectations, in order to just fit in at school or at work. And so you'll hear a lot more about that today. That's why I really care about this bill. Again, I would urge you to go back and look up the testimony in the hearing from the House side, because again, some of the questions that were asked by our very large and committee that's very diverse in thought were really thought-provoking. So if you really want to do a deep dive, that's the benefit of having the second hearing. You guys can kind of watch what we had to say. I really hope that you consider this. And Mr. Chair, thank you so much for allowing me to speak. I'll stand for questions.
Okay, thank you, Representative. Any questions? Senator Fasquedo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Stephanie Clayton. So this legislation's been introduced for a while, and we've actually had a hearing in this committee prior to the hearing in the House of Representatives. But I think it's very important, the statements that you've made. So each year, we've got closer and closer to the goal. And I just really appreciate your testimony due to the fact that initially some of the opposition was due to the fact that it was only pertaining to black women. And so now we see that this is a workplace situation where we are a state that we want our individuals, our citizens to go to work. And so I definitely, the hearing in the House, what, if you recall, there was a statement or information provided based on relaxing your hair causes cancer. And I think we're hearing more and more about that lately over the media. Can you elaborate on that aspect of it? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Thank you, Senator, and I appreciate the question. I cannot provide direct citations and direct information, although I do think that some other folks who will be speaking with you today will be able to. But from the testimony that we received in committee last year, we saw that the types of cancer that was caused inadvertently, especially by the hair relaxing products, was primarily, gynecological cancers like ovarian, uterine, things that affected reproductive health. And so that gives great cause for concern. I mean, all cancer is bad, but, this directly affects people's ability to procreate, which can, cause major destruction down the road. And all for, an appearance. And again, one other thing that I would like to add is that, a government that can discriminate against or that allows discrimination against one type of hairstyle can just as easily allow discrimination against another type of hairstyle. So when we think about in the future, and, when we put this type of legislation in place, we don't just want to think about it from the way that it is now, but for potential implications. And so I don't think that anyone's hair should be an issue. I think that it comes out the way it comes out, and we don't have a lot to say about it, or nor should we. We shouldn't be setting up societal expectations that have families that might have limited income that are spending money not only on something that hurts them, but it hurts them because they're spending money on hairstyles in order to conform to these irrational expectations when they should be spending it on books, on food, on anything else. And so that's why it's important to me. I want to make sure that we are freeing families up in order to live lives where they're not focusing on this kind of expectation.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Our next oral proponent is Stacy Nell, Kansas for let's see, get this right. Yeah, Kansas African American Affairs Commission. Stacy, welcome to the committee. Oh, and I forgot to mention, all conferees, state your name and title and whatever. It's early in the session, so I'm trying to remember all the rules.
I understand. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Stacy Nell. Congratulations, Senator. I think you are one of the first people who has actually correctly said my last name first time out of the gate. I am shocked. I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity to talk. Thank you, Senator Faustido, ranking member, and members of the committee. So I am the executive director of the Kansas African American Affairs Commission. You have my written testimony in front of you already, so I will divert from that and tell my personal story about my own hair journey. So I obviously am African American. So the hair that grows out of my head is not the hair that necessarily is considered appropriate by standards of society. I think I got my first relaxer when I was maybe 11 years old and relaxed my hair all the way up until I had children of my own. I remember my child, who also had gloriously curly hair, at the age of about 2, had looked up at me one day and she said, "Mommy, I want hair like yours. I want princess hair." And I don't think the sentence was done coming out of her mouth, because we've all seen enough Disney films to know that when a little child wants princess hair, what does she want? She wants Elsa hair that flows in the wind on its own. She wants the Rapunzel hair that's blonde and straight and goes straight down to the floor. And she looked at me with my relaxed hair and said, "Mommy, I want hair like yours. I want princess hair." And that hair does not grow out of my head. The sentence was not done coming out of her mouth when I knew I needed to go natural with my own hair. So I grew out my hair, and it was a learning curve, because I was, I've been relaxing my hair since I was 11. I literally did not know what my hair was like. Okay, didn't know what the texture was, didn't know how I was going to deal with it, didn't know what it was going to look like. I spent a lot of time on YouTube researching African American hair and figuring out how to deal with my own hair. Now, that was about 10 years ago. So now I have wonderful hair. These are twists. This is considered a protective hairstyle, okay? These are twists. My own natural hair is about shoulder length. It's actually fairly long, but this is just easier for me to take care of because, one, it protects my natural hair. It's cold outside, the weather, the elements, and I know what it's gonna do. I honestly wish one of these hearings would have fallen in the time when my hair is not in a protective style, so you can see what my natural hair looks like. I should have brought a picture, but I didn't know I was going to be allowed to speak. But so just to give you a personal account, like we can talk about this in terms of workplace development. We can talk about this in terms of cancer. We can talk about terms of this. But I want you to hear this from the term of a little 2-year-old child looking up at her mother and saying, I want hair like yours, because she realized that her hair didn't look like what my hair looked like, right? So now, one, I've learned to love my hair. I've learned to embrace my hair. I've learned to wear my hair in different ways and different styles, be it in protective styles or not. People ask me all the time, is that your hair? And I'm like, yeah, I bought it. It's mine. And to be able to show up as my most authentic self in all workplaces or wherever I go. I believe that this Crown Act would go a long way towards sending a message to all the little 2-year-olds, to all the, the 51-year-olds, to all the people who have hair that doesn't necessarily look like Stephanie Clayton's, to say that Kansas is a welcoming place. Kansas is a place where your family, your ancestry, the way you look, the way you choose to do your hair will be embraced and protected. What my hair looks like has no bearing on whether or not I can do my job. It's purely a cosmetic decision. However, there have been many examples, some I cited in my written testimony and some I'm sure you can read about, where people's hair has become the issue. And not only for African Americans. I know there was a recent one in Kansas where an indigenous little boy was asked to cut his hair, and that was his ancestry was that to cut his hair would be a sign of mourning. He did it because he was facing disciplinary action on behalf of the school. Broke my heart to read that. Because again, that's someone who's being asked to change just their appearance for some arbitrary outside standard that really does have an impact. So yes, I know that many on the board on the committee may have never considered, oh, what does my hair say about me, or how am I going to be viewed by my hair? Women probably have considered what they're going to do with their hair. But I would ask you to consider that there are people out there who really are literally having these conversations daily. There are little girls and little boys who really are looking at their parents for guidance and acceptance. And so thank you very much for the time. I'll stand for questions if you have any.
Yeah, committee, any questions? Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How many states do you know have similar laws that are the Crown Act?
I want to say 20. That's 36.
6 on the books? Wow.
And I do know that municipalities, and I know that there are representatives from municipalities who will speak, there are municipalities who have started to take up this issue. So I think rather than a patchwork municipality issue, it'd be nice if the state could come in and say, this is what it is.
In terms of the story you cited with the, I think you said a Native American boy, is that what you said?
Yes.
Did you go to like a private institution or was it a public school?
I do not know that off the top of my head.
I think sometimes, we have to be careful when, I think when you have organizations or certain, like military, I'm sure there's rules regarding grooming. And so we have to ensure we, I believe, respect those types of institutions. However, I'm inclined to support the bill. I have 2 boys that are African American, and so I've watched tons of documentaries on hair and African American culture and history and et cetera. And one of them that comes to mind is Colin in Black and White, where he shares his story about his hair and the discrimination and just lack of understanding, I think is really the word, is lack of understanding. And so I guess my question is, how do we help educate the community, business leaders, others, about African American hair?
Well, I think this bill, passing this bill would send a message to the community that it is something that should be taken seriously, and that conversation can start happening. Whether it's the job of the Kansas legislature to educate the community, I don't know. Do you need a bill for that? I'm not sure, but I do think that this type of a bill would go a long way to send a message.
So, and just my last question is: so you think? I mean, I always thought race would cover hair. I would think, but just because of it's just their natural biology. But you're saying that today, and I'm sure we'll hear from other stories, but you're saying today people are being discriminated still because really lack of understanding. I mean, so race is not current, I mean, your hair is not protected by your race based on current standards.
I believe it was said earlier, it's 2024 and people are sort of, the crazy is happening. So I think they're just like, I think people are coming up with new ways to discriminate against people. So I think we need to come up with new ways to help people be protected from discrimination. And so you are correct in saying that perhaps 10 years ago we could have said, oh gosh, race will cover it, but clearly race is not covering it. So people are coming up with new ways to discriminate, so I think we should meet that.
Any other questions, committee? Yeah, you know, you look at the Civil Rights Act, and it does cover race, color, and everything else, and so that's answers that. Do we have any stats on discrimination in the workplace based on this sort of stuff? I'm just curious if you've looked into that or have any kind of hard stats on that.
I do not have any hard stats on that. What I would have is what I've read in the newspaper about different instances that have happened.
Okay. Committee, any other questions? Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. All righty, let's move on to our next oral proponent of the bill. We have Amber Sellers, who is a Lawrence City Commissioner. Amber, are you in the room?
Are we on? Perfect. Good morning, Chair, Ranking Member, members of the committee. It is a pleasure to be here. My name is Amber Sellers. I am a City Commissioner for the City of Lawrence City Commission. I'm happy to be here to provide oral testimony in support of SB 36 in regards to the Crown Act. Ms. Nell did briefly mention that there are several local state municipalities who have passed the Crown Act, Lawrence being the first here in the state of Kansas. Then we had the City of Atchison and the City of Wichita. So I don't want to belabor any testimony that's been provided prior to me or maybe provided after. So I just want to give just a little bit of context as to how we in Lawrence traverse through this process and to provide a little bit of anecdotal content to what several of the committee members have shared. I am out of protected style. This is my hair in its natural state. I do wear protected styles sometimes through the summer and through the winter to give my hair a rest. I have naturally dry hair. These curls, they typically pop after a good deep condition, and then after that, it needs a whole lot of product to retain its beautiful luster and shine. And so sometimes that takes a lot of toll on my hair. And so hair needs the rest. That's for everybody. And so for me as a Black woman, ancestrally, I do braids. I may do long braids, I may do short braids, I may do braids with a little bit of curl, but those braids, whether they're box braids, twists, however they're known in their ancestral originality, I do wear them and they are protected. But this is my hair in its natural state and I do love it. And I've always loved it. I grew up loving my natural hair and in my family. It wasn't until I graduated from college and ventured into the professional world that I felt this overburden and sense to conform to Western standards as it related to my hair. And when that is at conflict of who you are as a person and how you were raised, it was very troubling. And it got to a point where I lost the identity of my natural ancestral hair, and I began to process my hair through relaxers. So it didn't start as a young age because I was forbidden to do that in my home, but as an older adult, professionally, that was something I did. And then I decided in 2014, enough is enough, and that's when I transitioned. So in Lawrence, we did decide to pass the Crown Act, and we use it as a protected class under ancestry. Because the idea is that race is protected. There's a social construct to it, but we believe that when it comes to protected styles as braids, locks, and twists in the Black community, that is ancestral. There's documentation of that. And so we knew it was protected, and that is where it needed to be. In Lawrence, we have our strategic plan, and one of our outcomes is prosperity and economic security. And you heard Representative Clayton talk about it. You've heard Stacey Nail talk about it. And as a commissioner, I'm talking about it because I want to make sure all of our citizens have an access to prosperity and economic security. And that relates to business development, business growth, economic pathways, and things of that nature. And so we believe that adding this component of the Crown Act into our Chapter 10 human rights ordinance was very much needed so that we can have that, so that we could begin to have that discussion. And we did. Our Human Rights Commission had discussions within the community. Many of our community members were aware of the Crown Act. We educated and enlightened, and we're going to have to continue to do that. So the thing is that we pass good, sound policy, not to be restrictive, but to show that we are open to creating a respectable environment for natural hair as it relates to ancestry. And so I understand we're going to need to continue to have that conversation. It's documented in many of our committee hearings here, but it has to also start with elected officials. And so having those discussions with advocacy organizations, businesses, and even fellow commissioners, we unanimously passed this ordinance in August, and I couldn't be more proud because it allows individuals such as myself who for so long had to, didn't feel authentic in their work environment because I'm constantly worried about what type of unsolicited comment or critique would come about my hair because it wasn't straightened or it wasn't cut a certain way or, why were you gone? So, questioning of using of my PTO to get my hair done, that helped show my true identity, but yet was a point of contention unnecessarily for so many in my job. And so many women, many Black women experience that. And we can only speak to women because this doesn't impact children in the school setting, but many Black women experience that. Many men experience that. What's the difference between a buzz cut or wearing a fade a little bit longer to show off their curls? Black men and Black women experience this in the workplace. And so we wanted to make sure that our businesses, our employers, and that our citizens and community knew that hair does not define one's intellect. It doesn't define their ability to create wealth, and it shouldn't. So I couldn't be more happy for what we were able to do. I stay strong in advocating for this on a state level. I would love to see it on a state level. And so I would like for you to strongly, and I urge you to give strong consideration to passing this out of committee. So thank you very much, and I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Ready? Any questions? Senator Reichman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your testimony. The second part of this bill, it talks about discrimination towards real estate transactions.
Mm-hmm.
Can you address that, or do you know why that's in there?
I can't address it from the state level. I think it's an idea as it relates to public accommodations, housing, and employment. So one should, based on their ancestral hair, the way I wear my hair should not determine one's ability to have a real estate transaction. And I know it sounds, in speaking it out loud, it sounds trivial, but again, it's the idea of discrimination. So, but because I wear braids and my hair is not bone straight, that shouldn't determine one's ability to have a transactional, using it as a form of discrimination shouldn't come into the conversation.
Sure, I guess the follow-up of that, so are we having this part of discrimination towards real estate transactions? I mean, is this people not getting, cannot make it because of the style of their hair?
Senator, I can't speak to that directly. I think what I can just speak to is just the idea of eliminating any type of discrimination based on ancestral hair. And so could it exist? I think there's anecdotal stories of that existing, maybe not here in the state of Kansas, but it does exist, and it has existed.
Do you guys, I'm just going to ask Jason or Mike, do you guys have any commentary that you'd like to add to that for Senator Reichman regarding the real estate part of it, or?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, that amendment with respect to the real estate statutes was done simply to maintain consistency and uniformity across all of the statutes under the Acts Against Discrimination.
Any other questions? I do have one. I guess when we talked about protective hairstyles, I was thinking about protective class with regard to race, religion. But when you're talking about protective hairstyles, you're talking about doing things to protect your natural hair.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That clarifies that.
There you go.
Okay.
All right.
I see no other questions. Thank you, Amber. We
Wonderful.
appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
We've got 5 more, and we've got about 18 minutes, so I'm going to limit and I hate to do this, but if you, our final conferees can limit it to about 3 minutes, it will help keep us on time. And I'll just give you a 1-minute cue so that you know when you're about out of time so that I don't interrupt you. So next up is Ruth Glover, Executive Director, Kansas Human Rights Commission. Ruth, welcome to Fed and State.
Thank you very much. My name is Ruth Glover, and I'm the Executive Director of the Kansas Human Rights Commission. We are actually the agency that administers the Kansas Act Against Discrimination, which is the bill that's actually being proposed to be amended. In case you're not familiar with the Kansas Human Rights Commission, we're the state's anti-discrimination agency. So we accept complaints of discrimination in employment, housing, and public accommodations. And the way that we achieve our mission is that we receive those complaints, we investigate them, and then we work to resolve them. Now, we're neutral on the bill because we can already accept complaints of discrimination when people feel like they have been subjected to some type of discrimination that is associated with their hair when it's also associated with a protected class. So what that can be, you know, ancestry, it could be race, it could be national origin, it could be because of their gender, because of their religion, or because of their disability. So on one hand, we can already accept these complaints. On the other hand, it certainly has a certain weight and message when those words are actually in the statute, so we can see both sides. The main thing we wanted to make you aware of is that we are not a resource when school children are involved. So there was mention of the little Native American schoolboy who was subjected to having his hair cut. And school children do not fall within our jurisdiction of employment, housing, or public accommodations. And the reason behind that is that there is a Kansas Supreme Court ruling from 1988, and they decided that public accommodations does not include students and student activities. And we provided that information to you in your testimony. It's in bolded in the 3rd paragraph. And so what the Kansas Supreme Court ruling said was, we believe that public schools are not places of public accommodations. And the legislative intent appears to be that the term public accommodations includes all businesses. And the reason behind that is in the statutes, it lists 21 businesses as examples of public accommodations. And then it said that the word services can reasonably be construed to mean businesses, not educational services. So when we have individuals who contact us who feel like their students have been discriminated against, we refer them to the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights. So if there's an interest in protecting the school children, what we would recommend is that the legislature take a look at the state's bullying statute to perhaps provide those same types of protections in the bullying statute. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Ruth. Any questions, committee? And we'll look over your testimony on that. I appreciate it very much.
All right. Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Sheila Officer. Oh, do you have a question, Senator Falscato?
Mr. Chairman, I just received a text message from Sheila Officer, the chairwoman of the Wichita Racial Profiling Board. She's not going to be able to speak virtually. So with that said, Mr. Chairman, if we could replace her with just a brief comment from Representative Ford Carr.
Sure, that'd be fine. Representative Carr?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and all those present. I'll be respectful of the 3-minute time limit. America, what we commonly call the Great American Melting Pot. It's often said that the strength of this country is based on those individuals that come from many different places and provide many different things that make us great, strong, and powerful. Last session, when I arrived here, many of you remember me looking somewhat different with respect to my own hair. I came with what we commonly call straight backs, which when I grew up as a child, they were just French braids. That's really not how I prefer to wear my hair, but because of COVID, I let my hair grow. I don't happen to like the feel of hair on the back of my head or near my ears, but I arrived last session with those straight backs because of the fact that I let my hair grow during COVID. I would like to say thank you to my colleagues because not a one of you said anything about the fact that I had my hair in straight backs. I wasn't discriminated in this body at all. And what I would ask is that we simply expect the rest of the state to have the same courtesies that we have in this body. I don't think that's too much to ask. Culturally, as a child, wearing French braids was a thing that we did, though I didn't choose to do it. And all I would ask is that in passing this legislation, we're simply requesting of the citizens the same thing that we request of ourselves here in this body. And I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Representative. Any questions? Senator Fasquedo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Ford Carr, I know you and I were at a South Central Legislative Delegation town hall meeting in Wichita on January 3rd, and I believe afterwards or we heard from a lot of different constituents, and so this issue of being terminated from place of employment. I know to some it may sound like it's a myth or we've already addressed that particular issue. Do you hear from any constituents where this is occurring today? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for the question, Senator Fasquedo. What I hear, and I believe it was addressed briefly earlier, what I hear is discrimination that takes place in schools and within the school districts. That's where I hear that there is discrimination that takes place with those people that wear other than what some would consider a traditional hairstyle. Braids, twists, locks, straight backs, that is traditional in our community. So we are only wearing our own traditional hairstyles, and that shouldn't be discriminated against at all anywhere. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, committee? Seeing none, thank you, Representative. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much.
Next up, Malik, do we have these on, I think these final three are WebEx. Tadone Neal, is Tadone? Tadana, is that how it's pronounced? Tadana. Sorry about that.
It's all right. Thank you for having me, Mr. Chairman and members of the Legislature Chair. I will be brief. I try not to read my statement verbatim, but I just wanted to say I am speaking in support of Senate Bill 36 to amend the definition of ancestry to include historical ancestral traits. I support this bill because I support Senate Bill 36 as it seeks to further define the word ancestry and as an unlawful discriminatory practice. I believe that further expounding upon the meaning of ancestry will provide further understanding of what is acceptable under the law. Additionally, I think expounding upon the definition will add further meaning to what's unlawful as it relates to discrimination with race and religion. A person's hairstyle could have cultural meaning, it could have religious meaning. It could be, as other ladies said, a mechanism of hair protection. And it could be just something that you're choosing to, simply because you're choosing to wear your hair in its natural state. And I feel like as a multi-race people, with multiple traits and characteristics, that someone should not be punishable by through discrimination. So, as you can see, I'm an African American woman. I have my hair in protective hairstyle. I went natural probably 5 to 6 years ago. Currently wearing it in some twists so that my hair can breathe, and I don't have to manipulate it constantly, and I'm allowing it to grow. So, I mean, honestly, it is something that, I look forward to because I can get up and go to work in the morning without having to do a bunch of stuff to my hair. It's a quick little something I can do. So I really enjoy having it and not having the stress of having to do my hair in the morning. Um, I mean, it looks nice. I do it, but you know what I mean, like over manipulating it. Um, so I feel like if my employer were to request that I change my hair because of beauty standards or whatever workplace standards, I would be disheartened and that I would feel like I didn't fit in. And it would really bring my morale down. But and besides that, if I would have to try to fit into standards, I would start damaging my hair trying to manipulate it a bunch of times to try to fit into the beauty standard. And then, as mentioned before, it would cost me a lot more money to continually get to the hairstylist to try to straighten it or do whatever meets quote unquote standard. Um, so I'm hoping that you're all familiarized with the cases that have happened nationwide with children being requested to cut their hair or even cutting their hair so that they can participate in sports events and simply walk in a commencement ceremony, graduation, which is
LaDonna,
not.
I'm
uh,
sorry. I'm sorry. 3 minutes is up. So I'm running out of time here. I'm sorry to cut you off
Can
on
I
that
wrap?
one.
Okay, can I wrap myself up?
Yeah, real quick. Sure.
Okay, so I just wanted to say I don't these things are happening nationwide, and so I really do feel like this this chair should support the bill because I just think it's one more thing that we can say that we are doing to protect our citizens here in Kansas.
Thank you, LaDonna. Questions, committee? Senator Fasquedo?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No question, but just to Donna Neal, I know how passionate you are about this situation, and you did speak before the Wichita City Council, and you, in your workplace and your work that you do there in the city of Wichita, advocating for those who have been affected by this issue. I just want to say thank you for testifying. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you to Donna. We'll move on to our next WebEx conferee, Donovan Dillon. Donovan, are you there? Okay, Donovan is not on. So we'll finish up with Michelle Watley, who's the founder of Shirley's Kitchen Cabinet, and see if Shirley's there for 3 minutes.
And are you all able to hear me?
Yes, we've got you, Shirley. Go ahead.
My name
Michelle,
is-
sorry. I'm sorry about that.
Yes, my name is Michelle Watley. Our organization is named for Shirley Chisholm, the first Black woman to run and have a seat in Congress, and the first Black woman to run for president on a major party ticket. Thank you, Chairman Thompson, Ranking Minority Leader Senator Foscadeau, and other members of the committee for having this hearing today and giving us the opportunity to speak on such an important issue. Shirley's Kitchen Cabinet is a nonpartisan nonprofit, and we work to amplify the voices and power of Black women so they can be better advocates on behalf of the issues that matter to them. We have over 2,000 supporters, Black women supporters between the states of Kansas and Missouri who all believe that this is an important issue, and that's why we come before you today. Because of time constraints, what I'll do is provide some additional statistics and information to answer some of the questions raised in earlier testimony. so that we can really nail down what the economic, employment, and education costs are if we're not able to move this bill forward. A report by the Kansas Chamber of Commerce, an economic forecast and report, found that there will be no workforce growth in Kansas over the next decade if we don't address workforce issues, particularly talent drain to neighboring states. We are losing talented employees to our neighboring states, and if we don't address this issue, there will not be enough workers in the workforce for businesses and employers to hire. One of the solutions that was recommended in that same report by the Kansas Chamber of Commerce is that we need to send a message that we welcome a diverse workforce. And our top competitor states in the region, including Nebraska and Minnesota, they have already passed the Crown Act. And the Crown Act could be a great way to send the message to potential employees that we value diversity. Governor Abbott of Texas and Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders of Arkansas also recently signed Crown Act bills into law in Texas and Arkansas. But there's a report that says that Black women spend 9 times more than any other group of women to maintain hair standards of straightening and keeping their hair straight. It ends up being more than $1 billion a year. Black women are spending more than $1 billion a year to keep their hair straight. And last that I checked, there were no hair straightening manufacturers in Kansas. And so that's economic prosperity that we don't get to have a hold of, and it is very costly to Black women. We worked with the Kansas Chamber of Commerce to come up with bill language in connection with Attorney Wendy Green, who wrote the National Crown Act language. She also wrote the language that has been presented in Congress, the language that was passed in Nebraska, Nevada, and a number of other states in the U.S. to come up with additional protections for employers who are concerned with having to adhere to OSHA standards and the like, and don't want their need to follow regulations to lead to discrimination cases. My first career out of high school, I was a carpenter for the Carpenters Union. I worked for J.E. Dunn Construction. My first job was the Nebraska Furniture Mart. My last job, one of my last jobs, was the H&R Block headquarters, where I led crews to finish up components of the H&R Block headquarters. I wore my long, very long hair in braids the entire time and had no issues with complying to standards of keeping my hair put up so it wouldn't get caught in a table saw, a circular saw, or in a drill, whatever other tool I was using. We've also worked with the Society of Human Resource Management to come up with language that makes sense that they can get behind. And we have agreed to be the organization that would help educate employers, if this bill were to pass, about the bill and how it could help them in their businesses. The National Institute of Health did a study and found that Black women who use the most popular straightening method, relaxers, experienced an increase of more than 50% of getting uterine cancer and other cancers such as breast cancer. So your likelihood of getting these cancers with using these products for Black women is greater than 50%. That's very high. That's a very high risk to take.
Michelle, I'm running out of time here, so if I could have you wrap it up real fast.
I will wrap it up. Children, 86% of Black children as young as 12, in a study by Dove, the national cosmetic group, found that 86% of children between the ages of 11 and 12 have experienced hair discrimination. The military branches, all of the military branches as of 2020, removed rules around wearing locks, braids, and twists, saying that those were hairstyles that can be worn in the military. And race does not protect hair as a protected characteristic, which is why we're trying to add to the definition of race that is already on the books, that hair be included as a characteristic. And someone asked about the Native American boy who was forced to cut his hair or had been asked to cut his hair, if that was a public or private school, and it is a public school that young man, the little boy, excuse me, the young boy was experiencing hair discrimination. So with that, we hope that you're able to pass this out of committee. Parents who send their kids to school should have the freedom of choice with their kids' education, but also how they send their kids to school. And kids shouldn't be kicked out of school, forced to cut their hair, losing scholarships, and suspended simply for wearing the hair that culturally reflects them in wearing their hair as God made it, how it grows out of their head. Thank you for your time. I hope that you support this bill.
Thank you, Michelle. Any questions, committee? Senator Fasquedo?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, I want to take the opportunity to thank you for holding the hearing on Senate Bill 36. You said you would last session, and you are a man of your word. You did. Also, I want to thank Michelle Watley. She and I have been working on this particular legislation since 2020. And I think she has stated very well, articulated, that it would send a message to, we talk about keeping our young people here and growing our workforce. I think this will do that. Michelle Watley, if you could, are you still on with us?
I am.
Okay, so I know that you've done some think tanks and some town halls or events where you work with young people who are in college and the professional young world, young professionals. If you could elaborate on that workplace, that employment piece, just give a couple of more stats of how it helps our economy here in Kansas. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Sure. We've talked to young people, older professionals who have, for the most part, had the experience of applying for a job and then being denied the job. There's a young man who had applied for a summer job at 16, had been told that he was highly qualified for the job, but that they wouldn't hire him because he had locks. There's a student in Ottawa College who is the captain of her cheerleading squad, which means she was leading the team, and was told if she didn't take down her braids, she would be kicked off the squad. The young lady ended up getting kicked off the squad, losing her scholarship, and has taken her talents to another school, I think in Florida. There's a most recent case of football players at Highland College who were on scholarship, and more than 4 football players have been kicked off the team for wearing locks and braids and twists. Our Super Bowl champions who are struggling this year, but have brought home Super Bowl wins, the Chiefs. A lot of those players wear the same hairstyle. Patrick Mahomes and his curly mohawk is a hairstyle that looks great on the field, and he wore that hairstyle to get us to a Super Bowl. But if he were to wear that hairstyle in the workplace, he could find himself disciplined, laid off, or forced off the job. There's a statistic found by Dove that says that more than 80% of Black women have experienced being suspended off the job for wearing their natural hair. So it's an economic loss not only to Black people, but also employers. Employers are missing out on good talent because of rules that have nothing to do with the ability to do the job.
Okay. With that, we're out of time. Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate that. Committee, we will have no meeting, obviously, tomorrow or Monday. We will have a bill hearing. Well, it's a previous bill that we heard last year. We're going to finish up a little bit of work on Monday. And we will close the hearing. Well, actually, you might review the oral proponents that are written. Ruth Glover was actually a neutral testimony in oral, and there are no opponent testimony. There's some written neutral testimony you may review. With that, we'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 36, and committee, we are adjourned. Thank you.